In a humble garage in Maple Grove, where summer evenings echo with the sound of children racing their toy cars, magic happens after sunset. Mike Anderson, the neighborhood mechanic, couldn't help but notice the Parker twins watching from their wheelchairs, their eyes following every move of the other kids. Each evening, they'd sit there at the end of their driveway until the last child went home. So every night after closing his repair shop, Mike began working on something special. 2 miniature cars with custom controls, reinforced frames, and matching candy apple red paint jobs. But when a convoy of luxury electric vehicles rolls up their quiet street one morning, led by Sarah Parker, the twins' mother who left years ago to build a tech empire, everything changes. What will happen when she discovers this quiet mechanic has given her children the one thing her billions couldn't buy, the freedom to play like everyone else? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mike Anderson's day always began the same way: the creak of his shop's roll-up door, the familiar scent of motor oil, and the soft click of the neon open sign flickering to life. Anderson's Auto Repair had been a fixture in Maple Grove for 15 years, as dependable as the seasons themselves. The worn leather toolbox that sat on his workbench had seen every make and model that rolled through those doors, its scratches and stains telling stories of countless repairs, restorations, and midnight inspirations. He first noticed the Parker twins 3 months ago, when spring was just beginning to soften the Michigan air. Jamie and Jesse, both 12, would appear at the end of their driveway like clockwork every afternoon around 4. Their grandmother, Martha, would position their wheelchairs just right, making sure they had a clear view of the neighborhood, kids racing their remote control cars up and down the street. Mike found himself watching them during his afternoon breaks, coffee cup in hand, leaning against the shop's doorframe. He recognized that look in their eyes, the same one he'd had as a kid, pressing his nose against toy store windows, dreaming of things just out of reach. The twins never complained, never called out to join. They just watched, their faces lit with a mix of wonder and longing that tugged at something deep in Mike's chest. Those Parker kids, his regular customer Tom had mentioned one day while Mike was changing his oil. Shame about their situation? Born with cerebral palsy, both of them. Martha's doing her best, but he'd left the sentence hanging, heavy, with unspoken challenges. Mike had nodded, tightening a bolt with perhaps more force than necessary. He thought about his own daughter, away at college now, and how she used to tear around the neighborhood on her bike, freedom incarnate. The contrast sat with him, taking root in his thoughts. That evening, after the last customer had left and the sun was painting the sky in shades of amber, Mike found himself sketching on the back of an invoice. His mechanical pencil moved almost of its own accord, drawing control layouts, safety features, dimensions for small chassis that could accommodate wheelchair users. Years of experience with custom modifications flowed through his fingers, each line a possibility, each measurement a promise. He worked late into the night, the shop's single overhead light casting long shadows across his workbench. The coffee went cold beside him as he refined his ideas, calculated material costs, considered alternatives. By midnight, he had something that might work. The next day, Mike paid special attention when the neighborhood kids brought their cars out. He noted the speeds, the turning radiuses, the way the controls worked. More importantly, he watched Jamie and Jesse. The boy and girl were identical in their enthusiasm, different only in the color of their hair clips. Blue for Jamie, red for Jesse. They tracked every movement, every race, their hands moving unconsciously as if holding invisible controllers. During his lunch break, Mike walked over to Martha Parker's house. She answered the door with the cautious politeness of someone used to dealing with well-meaning strangers. But her expression softened as he explained his idea. When he showed her his sketches, her eyes welled up, but she quickly brushed the tears away. The kids would love it. she said, her voice steady despite her glistening eyes. "But we can't afford—" Mike cut her off gently. "No charge, Mrs. Parker. I've got some spare parts lying around, and honestly, I could use a project." He didn't mention the savings he'd been putting aside for a new diagnostic computer. Some things were more important than equipment upgrades. That evening, after closing up shop, Mike opened his old toolbox. Inside, nestled among the wrenches and screwdrivers, was a small photo of his daughter standing next to her first bicycle, beaming with the pure joy of newfound freedom. He ran his thumb across the worn edge of the picture, then set it on his workbench. It would be his reminder of what he was working toward, the look he hoped to see on Jamie and Jesse's faces. He pulled out his tools, laid them out with practiced precision, and began to work. The quiet of the empty shop wrapped around him like an old friend, broken only by the soft classical music playing from his ancient radio and the occasional ping of cooling metal. Outside, the street had gone silent. The day's races finished. The twins long since wheeled inside, but in Mike's mind he could already hear the sound of their laughter, could already see them joining in the next race. He worked until his eyes grew heavy, until the moon cast long shadows through the shop windows. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now he had a purpose, a mission that felt right in his bones. As he locked up for the night, Mike glanced down the street toward the Parker's house. Sometimes he realized the most important repairs weren't to engines or transmissions, but to the small tears in the fabric of the world that most people never noticed. Jamie Parker's blue hair clip caught the morning light as she sketched in her notebook, her hand moving in careful, determined strokes. Next to her, Jessie adjusted her red clip and leaned over to see her sister's latest creation. The drawing showed a sleek race car, its lines flowing with the kind of imagination that didn't concern itself with engineering limitations. Their shared bedroom walls were covered with similar drawings, dreams rendered in colored pencil, and hope. "Make the spoiler bigger," Jessie suggested, pointing with a slightly trembling finger. Her cerebral palsy made the gesture challenging, but Jamie understood. They developed their own language of half-finished sentences and subtle movements, the kind of communication that only twins could perfect. From downstairs, their grandmother Martha's voice carried up. "Girls, breakfast, then we need to get ready for school." The twins shared a knowing look. Their grandmother had been up since dawn, as always, preparing their favorite breakfast of apple cinnamon oatmeal. They could set their watches by her routines that had shaped their lives since they were 2 years old, when their mother had left to pursue her tech startup dreams in California. Martha appeared in the doorway, her silver hair neatly tied back, wearing the apron they'd given her last Christmas. "What are my favorite artists working on this morning?" "Race cars, Gran," Jamie answered, holding up her sketch. "This one has special controls, see? Like the ones Mr. Anderson is making." Martha's eyes softened. She'd seen the hope bloom in her granddaughter's eyes when Mike Anderson had shown up at their door with his drawings and his kind offer. It was the same hope she'd been trying to keep alive for 10 years, through doctor's appointments, therapy sessions, and countless moments when the world seemed designed for everyone but her girls. "Speaking of which," Martha said, helping Jessie adjust her position in her wheelchair, "I saw his shop light on late again last night. That man's determined, I'll give him that." The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Martha helped them wash and dress, her movements gentle but sure. She'd learned early on to maintain their dignity while providing the assistance they needed. The twins had inherited her determination, insisting on doing whatever they could for themselves, no matter how long it took. At breakfast, Jessie spotted their elderly tabby cat, Maxwell, prowling around his food bowl. "Gran, can we feed Max today?" Martha smiled, reaching for the cat food in the cabinet. She placed a small scoop in each girl's lap, watching as they carefully maneuvered their wheelchairs to Maxwell's corner. The cat weaved between their wheels, purring as they worked together to fill his bowl without spilling. These small victories were their daily bread. The school bus arrived precisely at 7:45, Mr. Johnson lowering the wheelchair lift with a cheerful, "Good morning, Parker ladies." The twins had long since learned to ignore the stares of other students. Their minds were elsewhere anyway, floating between Jamie's latest car designs and Jessie's calculations of velocity and distance. She'd always had a head for numbers. Their sixth-grade teacher, Ms. Reynolds, had rearranged the classroom at the start of the year, creating wide aisles between desks and a special workspace for the twins. But it was during recess that the real challenges emerged. While other kids played basketball or raced around the playground, Jamie and Jessie would position themselves near the bench, watching, just like they did with the neighborhood races. But lately, something had changed. There was a new spark in their conversations, a fresh energy in Jamie's drawings and Jessie's calculations. Mr. Anderson's project had given them something they hadn't realized they were missing: anticipation. "Do you think they'll really work?" Jessie asked that afternoon as they watched the neighborhood kids setting up their racing course. "The cars Mr. Anderson is making?" Jamie reached over and squeezed her sister's hand. "They have to. Did you see his toolbox? Anyone with a toolbox that old must know what they're doing." The logic made perfect sense to them both. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the races, but their minds were elsewhere, imagining the feel of controls under their hands, the thrill of competition, the simple joy of joining in instead of watching from the sidelines. As the sun began to set, they caught a glimpse of Mike Anderson through his shop window, bent over his workbench. Jessie pulled out her notebook, covered in mathematical formulas, while Jamie added another detail to her latest car design. They weren't just watching anymore. They were planning, dreaming, preparing. Something was about to change in their world, and for once, they were ready for it. The coffee stain on Mike's blueprint spread like a copper-colored sunset, but he barely noticed it. 3 nights of research had culminated in this moment, his mechanical pencil hovering over the paper as he double-checked his measurements. The basic frame of a remote-control car was simple enough. He'd modified dozens for the neighborhood kids over the years. But this was different. This wasn't about making something faster or flashier. It was about making something possible. His laptop screen glowed with dozens of open tabs, medical websites describing cerebral palsy, adaptive technology forums, and specialized control system manufacturers. His browser history read like a crash course in accessible design. Empty coffee cups clustered around his keyboard told the story of late nights spent learning about grip strength limitations, motion control challenges, and safety requirements. "Keep it simple," he muttered to himself, an old mechanic's mantra. The coffee-ringed sketch showed a modified chassis with a raised platform, custom-mounted controls positioned for minimal arm movement, and a reinforced frame that could handle occasional collisions. He'd labeled every component, every modification, with the precise attention of someone who understood that details weren't just important. They were everything. The bell above his shop door chimed, pulling him from his calculations. Martha Parker stood in the doorway, holding a covered dish that smelled suspiciously like his favorite apple pie. "Thought you might need some brain food," she said, setting the dish on the corner of his workbench. Her eyes caught the sketches, and she leaned in for a closer look. "That's quite something you're planning." Mike straightened up, his back protesting the hours spent hunched over the bench. "It's the control system that's the tricky part," he explained, pointing to his drawings. "The girls need something they can operate without too much arm movement, but it still has to give them proper control. I'm thinking a modified joystick setup with custom pressure sensitivity." Martha nodded, her expression a mixture of hope and concern. "And it'll be safe. Safer than those factory-made racers the other kids use," Mike assured her. "I'm building in emergency shutoffs, impact cushioning, and remote override capabilities. Plus, I'm keeping the speed limited until they get the hang of it." He pulled out another sketch, this one showing the custom seat mounting system. "See here? Everything's designed to work with their wheelchairs. No transfers needed. The controls will mount right where they can reach them naturally. Martha's hand trembled slightly as she touched the drawing. You know, they've never asked for anything like this. Never complained about not being able to join in. But I see them watching those races every day, and I know, Mike said quietly, understanding the weight of what remained unspoken. After Martha left, Mike returned to his sketches with renewed purpose. He'd need to modify 2 identical RC cars as base units, something sturdy but not too heavy. The electronics would need to be completely rewired, the control systems custom-built. His parts supplier, Old Joe, would probably think he'd lost his mind when he placed the order. He was making his final notes when he noticed Jamie's latest drawing had fallen from his bulletin board. He picked it up, smoothing the creases. Her imagined race car had impossible curves and oversized spoilers, but there was something in its spirit that spoke to him. He pinned it back up, right next to his technical drawings. Sometimes, the best. Engineering started with an impossible dream. The shop's ancient clock showed 11:30 p.m. when Mike finally set down his pencil. The blueprint was ready. Not perfect, maybe, but solid. Tomorrow he'd start ordering parts, and then the real work would begin. He folded the drawings carefully, sliding them into a fresh manila envelope. As he locked up for the night, he caught sight of his reflection in the shop window. His father's voice echoed in his memory. A good mechanic fixes cars, son. A great one fixes problems. Mike smiled slightly, tucking the envelope under his arm. Maybe, just maybe, he was about to do both. The first prototype control unit sat on Mike's workbench like a piece of modern art, all smooth curves and ergonomic angles. 3 weeks of trial and error had produced something that looked deceptively simple. A joystick mounted on a curved platform with oversized buttons positioned for easy access. The real complexity lay inside, where custom-built circuits translated minimal movements into precise commands. Now that's different. Old Joe whistled, delivering another box of specialized parts. The supplier had been making special trips to Mike's shop, curious about the project that required such unusual components. Never seen control units quite like these. Mike flexed his hand, cramped from hours of detailed soldering. Had to design them from scratch. Regular RC controllers need too much finger dexterity. He demonstrated the smooth action of the joystick, the way it responded to even the slightest touch. The twins have enough arm strength. They just need the right interface to use it. Word had spread through Maple Grove about Mike's evening project. Customers lingered after their oil changes and brake jobs, drifting toward the corner of the shop where 2 small car chassis were taking shape. The vehicles themselves were works of precision engineering, reinforced frames, custom suspension systems, and safety features that would make a Swedish car manufacturer proud. Tommy Chen, the neighborhood's resident electronics enthusiast, started, stopping by in the evenings. Need an extra pair of hands, he'd ask, already reaching for a screwdriver. His expertise with circuit boards proved invaluable, especially when they were fine-tuning the response sensitivity of the controls. The cars' bodies were Mike's personal pride, candy apple red with racing stripes, just like the hot rods he'd dreamed about as a kid. He'd spent hours getting the paint just right, adding layer after layer until it gleamed like liquid ruby. If we're doing this, he'd told Martha, we're doing it with style. Every evening he could see the Parker twins, at their usual spot, watching the neighborhood races. But now they had notebooks in their laps, Jamie's filled with drawings of racing lines and track layouts, Jesse's with calculations of turning radiuses and speed ratios. They didn't know it yet, but their mathematical precision would prove crucial. In the final calibration of the control systems, the project had taken on a life of its own. Mike's regular customers brought coffee and sandwiches during his evening work sessions. Mrs. Rodriguez from the bakery started leaving fresh pastries on his workbench every morning. Even Mr. Peterson, who'd initially complained about Mike's Shop lights burning late into the night now regularly stopped by to check on the progress. "You're giving them more than just toys, you know," Martha said one evening, watching Mike adjust the safety harness mounts. She'd taken to bringing him dinner on the nights when the work stretched late. "You're giving them a chance to be part of something." Mike nodded, focusing on the delicate adjustment. Each component had to be perfect, not just working, but intuitive. The twins would need to feel the cars as natural extensions of themselves. "They've always been part of something," he replied. "We're just making it easier for everyone else to see it." The breakthrough came on a Wednesday night when the first control unit successfully completed its initial bench test. Mike and Tommy stood watching as the small motor responded perfectly to each subtle movement of the joystick. The precision was exactly what they'd been working toward. Smooth acceleration, responsive steering, and fail-safe emergency stops. "Ready for a real test?" Tommy asked, eyeing the nearly completed cars. Mike ran his hand along the gleaming red finish of the nearest chassis. "Almost. Need to run through the safety protocols one more time." He picked up his checklist: emergency shut-off systems, impact absorption, signal reliability, battery safeguards. Each item represented hours of research and testing. That night, after everyone had left, Mike sat in his office reviewing the project expenses. The costs had run higher than expected, eating into his shop's maintenance fund. But then he looked at the two red cars, sitting side by side like patient thoroughbreds waiting for their riders, and knew that some investments couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Through his window, he could see the empty street where soon two young racers would make their debut. The thought brought a smile to his face as he reached for his tools. There was still work to be done, but for the first time he could see the finish line. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for making history in Maple Grove. Mike had been up since 4, running final diagnostics on both cars, checking and rechecking every system. Tommy Chen filmed the entire process on his phone, creating a safety verification record that would later prove invaluable. Control Unit 1, check. Braking system, check. Emergency shutoff, check, Mike muttered, moving methodically through his list. Each car had been tested individually over 50 times, but today was different. Today, they'd have precious cargo. Martha wheeled the twins up the driveway at exactly 9, as planned. Jamie wore her lucky blue hair clip, Jessie her red one, both girls practically vibrating with anticipation. They'd caught glimpses of the cars through the shop windows over the past weeks, but this was their first proper look at what Mike had created. "They're beautiful," Jamie whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the gleaming red paint, the custom controls, the perfectly scaled racing seats. Jessie reached out tentatively, running her fingers along the smooth curve of the nearest fender. Mike knelt between their wheelchairs, his voice gentle but serious. "Now remember what we talked about. We're going to take this slow. First, we'll practice with the controls while the cars are up on blocks. Once you're comfortable, we'll try some straight-line movements. No racing today. That comes later, after you're both experts." The twins nodded solemnly, but their eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. Mike helped position their wheelchairs one at a time next to the raised platforms. The custom mounts clicked into place with satisfying precision, securing their positions while leaving them full visibility and comfort. "Okay, Jamie, you first. Rest your hand on the control like we practiced. Gentle pressure is all you need. The system will respond to the slightest touch." Mike stood close, one hand near the emergency shutoff, though he tried to make the motion look casual. Jamie's hand trembled slightly as she gripped the modified joystick. The small motor whirred to life, responding to her touch. Her face lit up with a smile that made all those late nights worth it. "I'm doing it," she exclaimed, experimenting with different pressures, learning how the car responded to each subtle movement. Jessie watched intently, her analytical mind clearly processing every detail of her sister's experience. When it was Jessie's turn, she approached the controls with characteristic precision. Her first movements were tentative, but within minutes, She was adjusting the speed with remarkable accuracy. "The resistance is perfect," she noted, demonstrating a level of technical understanding that made Mike smile. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors who'd heard about the project and come to witness this moment. Among them was Tommy, still filming, and Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd brought a box of her special celebration pastries. After 30 minutes of practice with the cars elevated, Mike looked at Martha for approval. She nodded, wiping tears from her eyes as discreetly as possible. "All right, ladies," Mike announced. "Ready to feel some real movement?" The next few minutes were a symphony of precise adjustments. Mike and Tommy carefully lowered each car from its testing platform while Martha ensured the twins were securely positioned. The driveway had been cleared and swept clean, creating a perfect testing ground. "Remember," Mike said, "straight lines only. Just feel how the car moves with you." Jamie went first again, easing her car forward with exquisite care. The motion was smooth, controlled, perfect. She guided it forward about 10 feet, then brought it to a gentle stop, exactly as they'd practiced. The gathered crowd burst into applause. Jessie followed, her movements reflecting her mathematical mind. She matched her sister's distance exactly, stopping parallel to Jamie's car. The twins turned to each other, sharing a look of pure joy that would be forever etched in Mike's memory. "Can we do it again?" they asked in unison. Mike checked his safety monitors one more time, then nodded. "All day if you want. This is just the beginning." As the twins began their second run, now with growing confidence, Martha touched Mike's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, but Mike shook his head. "Don't thank me yet," he said, watching the girls master their new freedom. "We've got races to win." 2 weeks after the initial test drive, Maple Grove's regular Saturday afternoon races had transformed into something entirely new. The makeshift track now featured wider turns and smoother surfaces, carefully designed to accommodate all racers. Jamie and Jessie Parker sat among their peers, control units mounted securely, their candy apple red cars gleaming in the summer sun. "Next up, Heat 3. Announced Tommy Chen, who had somehow become the neighborhood's official race coordinator. Jamie and Jessie Parker, Danny Thompson and Lisa Rodriguez. He consulted his clipboard, which now included detailed track assignments and safety protocols developed with Mike's guidance. The twins had practiced religiously every evening after school, their natural competitive spirit driving them to master every aspect of their car's handling. Jessie had memorized the optimal racing lines for every turn, while Jamie had developed an almost intuitive feel for the subtle adjustments needed to maintain speed through the corners. "Racers ready?" Tommy called out. 4 hands gripped their respective controls, 2 on traditional RC controllers, 2 on Mike's custom interfaces. The small crowd of parents and neighbors held their breath, still not quite used to seeing the Parker twins lined up alongside the other racers. 3, 2, 1, go! The cars shot forward, electric motors humming. Jamie took an early lead, her car hugging the inside line through the first turn. Jessie held back slightly, using the strategy she'd calculated after studying dozens of races, save energy for the final straight. Danny and Lisa, both experienced racers, found themselves adapting to new challenges. The twins' smooth, precise driving style had introduced a different kind of competition. It wasn't just about raw speed anymore. It was about control, planning, and racecraft. "Look at that inside pass!" Mrs. Rodriguez cheered as Jessie's car slipped past Danny's on the back straight. The crowd had grown larger than usual, drawn by the infectious excitement of seeing the Parker twins compete. Martha Parker stood next to Mike, clutching his arm during particularly close moments. "I never thought," she kept saying, unable to finish the sentence. Mike understood. Some dreams are too big for words. The race came down to the final lap. Jamie led by half a car length, with Jessie and Lisa neck and neck for second place. Danny had dropped back after taking a turn too wide, but he was grinning just as much as everyone else. Jamie crossed the finish line first, her car performing a perfect victory spin that she'd practiced in secret. Jessie edged out Lisa for second, place by mere inches, using the mathematical precision she'd calculated for this exact scenario. The small trophy Tommy presented to Jamie might as well have been Olympic gold, judging by her smile. It was a simple thing, a plastic car mounted on a wooden base, but it represented something far more valuable than its modest material suggested. "Speech!" someone called out, and Jamie looked momentarily panicked until Jessie squeezed her hand. "Thank you," Jamie said, her voice soft but clear. "To everyone who made the track bigger so we could race too. To Mr. Anderson for building our cars. And to Jessie for being the best racing partner ever." The crowd applauded, but Mike noticed something even more significant. The other kids were gathering around the twins, asking about their driving techniques, admiring their cars' custom features, and most importantly, treating them just like any other racers. Later that evening, as Mike helped pack up the track equipment, Danny Thompson approached with his father. "Mr. Anderson," Danny said, holding his own car, "could you maybe look at my steering? I want to make it smooth like the twins' cars." Mike smiled, recognizing the shift in perspective. The twins weren't being accommodated anymore. They were setting the standard. "Bring it by the shop on Monday," he said. "We'll see what we can do." As the sun set on Maple Grove's first truly inclusive race day, Mike watched the Parker twins heading home, their grandmother pushing their wheelchairs while they animatedly discussed racing strategies for next week. Jamie's trophy sat proudly in her lap, catching the evening light. Tommy approached, reviewing his race notes. "You know what this means, right?" he asked Mike. "We're going to need a proper tournament bracket now, and maybe some more trophies." Mike nodded, already thinking about refinements he could make to the twins' cars based on their racing performance. But more than that, he was thinking about the way the neighborhood had changed, how a simple Saturday afternoon race had become something that brought out the best in everyone. "Order the trophies," he said. "Something tells me we're going to need them." The business section of the Detroit Free Press lay spread across Mike's workbench, coffee forgotten beside it. The headline caught everyone's attention who walked into the shop that morning. "EV pioneer Sarah Parker returns to Michigan, revolutionary new design to be unveiled." The accompanying photo showed a confident woman in her early 40s standing before a sleek prototype vehicle. Her smile hadn't changed since her yearbook photo still hung in Maple Grove High's Hall of Notable Alumni. Tommy was the first to bring it up during the morning oil changes. "Did you see? The twins' mother. She's some kind of tech billionaire. Now, built her whole empire from scratch out in California." Mike nodded, trying to focus on the transmission he was repairing. The article mentioned Sarah's company, Phoenix Motors, and its groundbreaking work in adaptive vehicle technology. The irony wasn't lost on him. Martha Parker came by the shop later that afternoon, her hands twisting her handkerchief in a way Mike had never seen before. "The girls saw the paper this morning," she said quietly. "They've been very quiet since then." The twins had missed that day's after-school race practice, the first time since they'd started competing. Their usual spot at the end of the driveway remained empty, their candy apple red racers sitting untouched in the garage. "Sarah called," Martha continued, sinking into Mike's office chair. "First time in 3 years. She saw some local coverage of the races online, the videos Tommy's been posting. Martha's voice caught. "She's coming home." The news spread through Maple Grove like wildfire. At the diner, at the grocery store, at the weekly neighborhood council meeting, conversations turned to Sarah Parker's imminent return. Some remembered her as the brilliant but restless teenager who'd left for Stanford with big dreams. Others recalled the young mother who'd walked away from her 2-year-old daughters, leaving her mother to raise them while she chased those dreams. "Did you know?" Mrs. Rodriguez whispered to Mike over the counter of her bakery. "Phoenix Motors is working on self-driving cars for disabled people. Worth billions now, according to the internet." Mike thought about the twins' custom races in his garage, their hand-built controls and loving attention to detail. Sometimes the simplest solutions meant the most. That evening he drove past the Parker house and saw lights in the twins' room. Through the window he could make out Jamie and Jessie sitting together on one of their beds, looking at what appeared to be an old photo album. Their grandmother's silhouette moved between rooms, restless with nervous energy. The next morning, Jessie wheeled herself into Mike's shop just as he was opening up. Her red hair clip caught the early light. "Is she coming to take us away?" She asked without preamble, her voice smaller than he'd ever heard it. Mike set down his coffee and pulled up a chair to sit at her eye level. "I don't know, kiddo, but I do know that you and your sister have built something special here. The whole neighborhood has." Jessie nodded, fidgeting with her chair's armrest. "Jamie's scared. She won't say it, but I can tell. We looked up Mom online last night. Her cars, they drive themselves. She probably thinks our races are primitive." "Hey," Mike said gently, "there's nothing primitive about following your dreams. Your cars might not drive themselves, but they're driven by something." "Better heart." A small smile tugged at Jessie's lips. "We have a race on Saturday. Will you make sure everything's perfect with the cars, just in case she comes?" "Tell you what," Mike replied, reaching for his tools. "Why don't you help? Me check them over? Nobody knows these machines better than you girls." As they worked, Mike could feel the tension in Jessie's shoulders slowly easing. They went through each system methodically, the familiar routine of maintenance providing comfort in its predictability. But later, after Jessie had left for school, Mike found himself staring at the newspaper photo again. Sarah Parker's company wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary. And now, she was coming back to Maple Grove, back to the daughter she'd left behind, back to a community that had wrapped itself protectively around two little girls in wheelchairs who just wanted to race. The convoy of electric vehicles arrived on a Thursday morning, their silent motors adding to the surreal quality of the moment. 3 Tesla Escorts flanked a prototype vehicle that looked more spacecraft than car, its sleek lines drawing every eye on Maple Grove. Sarah Parker stepped out of the lead vehicle wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than a month's revenue from Mike's shop. She stood for a moment, taking in the unchanged facade of her childhood home. The garden boxes Martha still maintained, the wheelchair ramp Mike had helped install 3 years ago, the fresh tire tracks from the twins' racing practice the evening before, all of it new to her eyes. The neighborhood tried to pretend it wasn't watching. Mrs. Rodriguez suddenly became very interested in sweeping her already spotless storefront. Tommy Chen made a show of adjusting his car's side mirror, phone discreetly recording. Even Mr. Peterson's cat seemed to pause on his fence to observe the homecoming. Martha opened the front door before Sarah reached it. Mother and daughter stood, facing each other, a decade of absence hanging between them like a heavy curtain. "Mom," Sarah said, her confident CEO voice wavering slightly. "You look well. The girls are at school," Martha replied, answering the question Sarah hadn't asked. "They'll be home at 3, Sarah nodded, glancing at her watch, a subtle, expensive gesture. "I know. I've arranged to have my afternoon meetings rescheduled." She turned to gesture at the prototype vehicle. "I brought something for them. It's a modified version of our latest autonomous system, specially adapted for..." The sound of Mike's shop door opening cut through the morning quiet. He hadn't planned to interrupt, but a customer's brake job couldn't wait just because a tech billionaire had come home. The familiar squeak of the hinges drew Sarah's attention. "You must be Mike Anderson," she said, crossing the street with the measured steps of someone used to commanding rooms. "I've seen the videos of your project." Mike wiped his hands on his shop towel, noting how her eyes tracked the motion. "Just trying to help the girls join in the fun," he said simply. "It's impressive, actually," Sarah continued, her tone sliding into something more professional. "The adaptation of standard RC components, the custom control interfaces, it's quite ingenious in a grassroots sort of way. Of course, at Phoenix Motors, we're developing systems that will eliminate the need for any manual control, allowing full autonomous The sound of the school bus's hydraulic brakes interrupted her presentation. Jamie and Jessie sat wide-eyed behind the glass, their matching hair clips bright against their dark hair. Mr. Johnson, the bus driver, took extra care helping them down the wheelchair lift, as if he could shield them from the moment with his gentleness. Sarah's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. The twins had grown so much, yet somehow looked exactly like the toddlers she'd left behind. She took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain for perhaps the first time since she'd left Maple Grove. Jamie spoke first, her voice steady despite her white-knuckled grip on her wheelchair's armrest. "We saw your cars online. They're very advanced. But we like driving ourselves," Jessie added quietly, a hint of steel beneath the softness. Sarah glanced between her daughters and the prototype vehicle she'd brought, her grand gesture suddenly feeling hollow. "Of course, I just thought, with your condition, autonomous driving would be more what?" Jessie's question hung in the air. Mike watched the exchange from his shop doorway, seeing the moment through a mechanic's eyes. Sometimes the most complicated systems failed because of the simplest oversights. Sarah Parker had built an empire, around solving problems, but she'd missed the most basic diagnosis. Her daughters didn't need their cars to drive themselves. They needed their cars to let them drive. The twins wheeled past their mother with polite nods, heading for the garage where their racing cars waited. It was Thursday after all, and they had practice to do. "They're good drivers," Mike found himself saying into the awkward silence. "Won 3 races last month. Maybe you'd like to watch them practice?" Sarah stood very still, caught between the future she'd engineered and the present she'd stumbled into. Her prototype vehicle gleamed in the sunlight, full of promises about independence and automation. But the sound of garage doors opening drew everyone's attention, and moments later, 2 candy apple red racers rolled out, their custom controls catching the light. "They built those racing lines themselves," Mike added softly. "Jessie did the calculations. Jamie designed the approaches. They don't need the cars to think for them. They just needed someone to believe they could think for themselves." Sarah Parker, CEO of Phoenix Motors, watched her daughters set up their practice course with the precision of experienced racers. For all her billions, all her innovations, she was witnessing something her autonomous systems could never provide: the simple joy of taking control. The old Parker family album sat open on the kitchen table, its pages showing a younger Sarah, pushing toddler versions of the twins on adaptive swings. Martha had pulled it out after dinner, perhaps hoping the memories might bridge the gulf that 12 years had carved between mother and daughters. "You both love the park," Sarah said, softly touching a faded photograph. "I used to dream about building something that would let you play on everything, not just the adaptive equipment." "We still love the park," Jamie replied, adjusting her blue hair clip. "We go there to practice racing sometimes." Mr. Anderson helped. "The community install rubber mats around the track so our wheelchairs don't get stuck in the grass." Sarah's fingers tensed slightly on the album's page. Every conversation seemed to circle back to Mike Anderson and his homemade racing cars. Her prototype vehicle sat unused in the driveway, its advanced AI waiting for passengers who showed no interest in autonomous transportation. "I've been thinking," Sarah began carefully, "about incorporating some of Mike's control designs into our next generation of adaptive vehicles at Phoenix. We could mass-produce them, make them available to children everywhere. With our resources, we could refine the system, add safety features perhaps even—" "But they wouldn't be the same," Jessie interrupted, her voice unusually firm. "They wouldn't be built for us. They wouldn't have the little marks where Jamie scraped the paint on her first turn, or the spot where Tommy helped fix my control panel after I took that jump too fast." Martha watched the exchange from the kitchen sink, her hands methodically drying dishes that were already dry. The familiar routine seemed to anchor her as past and present collided in her small kitchen. Outside, the evening races were starting. The sound of children gathering filtered through the open window, along with Tommy Chen's voice, announcing the heats. The twins shifted in their chairs, eyes drawn to the activity they were missing. "You should go," Sarah said, surprising herself. "Your fans are waiting." The girls didn't need to be told twice. Martha helped them navigate to the door, their movements practiced and efficient. Sarah followed, standing awkwardly on the porch as her daughters joined their racing community. Mike was there, as she'd known he would be, making last-minute adjustments to the twins' cars. She watched as he checked each control interface with meticulous care, his movements those of someone who understood that precision wasn't just about engineering, it was about trust. "Your daughters are quite the celebrities around here," a voice said beside her. Sarah turned to find Mrs. Rodriguez offering her a cup of coffee. "They've inspired quite a few changes in Maple Grove. The community center is installing ramps. Next week, the school's science fair is adding a category for adaptive technology." Sarah accepted the coffee, her throat tight. "I've been reading about them online. The local news coverage, Tommy's race videos. I thought I was coming back to show them what I'd created for them, but they've created something for themselves." Mrs. Rodriguez finished gently. The race began, and Sarah found herself holding her breath as Jamie took the first turn, executing a perfect racing line that spoke of hours of practice and hard-earned skill. Jesse followed in close formation, their candy apple red cars moving like synchronized dancers on the asphalt. "They're not just racing," Mike said, appearing beside them with his own coffee cup. "They're teaching us all something about adaptation. Look." He pointed to where Danny Thompson was showing a younger kid in a leg brace how to modify his RC controller for easier handling. Near them, Tommy Chen was explaining to some parents how they'd redesigned the track to be more inclusive for all skill levels. "I build autonomous cars," Sarah said almost to herself, "systems that think and adapt so people don't have to. I thought I was solving problems." "Sometimes," Mike replied, watching the twins navigate a particularly challenging section of the course, "people don't need their problems solved. They just need the tools to solve them themselves." The race continued as the sun set over Maple Grove, casting long shadows across the track. Sarah Parker, who had built an empire around the future of transportation, stood quietly on her mother's porch, watching her daughters master the present in their own way, on their own terms. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with messages from board members and shareholders, but for the first time in years, the future they wanted to build seemed less certain than the one unfolding before her on a humble neighborhood track. Mike knew something was different the moment Sarah Parker walked into his shop early Monday morning, carrying a leather portfolio instead of wearing her usual corporate suit. She looked more like the girl who used to live 3 houses down. Less like the CEO of Phoenix Motors. "I spent all weekend watching them race," she said without preamble, placing the portfolio on his workbench and reviewing every video Tommy Chen has posted online. "What you've built here? It's more than just cars." Mike set down his wrench, giving her his full attention. The portfolio opened to reveal detailed technical drawings, professional versions of his original sketches, enhanced with engineering, specifications and materials analysis. "Phoenix Motors wants to partner with you," Sarah continued, her voice soft but intense. "Not to mass-produce autonomous vehicles, but to create a line of adaptive racing cars based on your designs. Real racing cars, built for kids who want to drive themselves." She spread out more documents, market analyses, safety regulations, production schedules. "We have the resources to refine the control systems, strengthen the safety features, make them available to every child who dreams of racing but needs adaptive solutions." Mike studied the drawings, noting how they'd preserved the essential elements of his design while adding sophisticated improvements. "And what happens to our Saturday races, to the community we've built here?" "That's the best part," Sarah said, pulling out another document. "We want to establish a racing league. multiple divisions based on age and ability levels, but Maple Grove would be our pilot program, our proving ground. The twins, they'd be our first official test drivers. The proposal laid out plans for converting Mike's shop into a development center, complete with testing facilities and a proper track. The salary figure at the bottom of the page made him blink twice. "You'd have a full engineering team," Sarah added, watching his reaction. "But you'd maintain creative control. Nobody knows better than you what these kids need." Mike walked to his shop window, looking out at the street where just yesterday the twins had been practicing their new cornering technique. "I need to think about it," he said finally, "and discuss it with some people." Sarah nodded, gathering her documents except for one copy of the proposal. "Of course, but Mike," she paused at the door, "I was wrong before, about the autonomous systems. Sometimes the best technology is the kind that empowers people instead of replacing them." That evening, Mike held an impromptu meeting in Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery after closing time. Martha and the twins were there, along with Tommy Chen and several other neighborhood parents. The proposal sat in the center of the table, surrounded by half-eaten pastries. "It would mean proper safety certification," Mike explained, addressing the concerns he'd heard all day. "Professional-grade materials, backup systems, everything we've wanted but couldn't afford." "But would it still be ours?" Jamie asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. "Would we still get to help design things like we do now?" Jesse added, "Would other kids still be able to race with us, even if they can't afford the new cars?" Mike shared their concerns. The program they'd built wasn't just about racing, it was about belonging, about a community that had come together to make sure everyone could participate. "Your mother's thought of that," he said, turning to a specific page in the proposal. "Phoenix Motors would establish a foundation to provide equipment to families who need it. And there's a clause here about maintaining the original spirit of the program, keeping it accessible, community-focused." Tommy picked up the technical specifications, whistling softly. "With these resources, we could help a lot more kids. Not just here in Maple Grove, but everywhere." Martha, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke. "Sarah's trying to build a bridge," she said, looking at her granddaughters. "Between what she knows how to do and what you girls have shown her is really needed." Mike gathered the documents, careful to keep them in order. "I'm not deciding anything tonight," he said. "This affects all of us. We built this program together, and we'll decide its future together." As the meeting broke up, he caught sight of Sarah through the bakery window, walking alone down the street where she'd grown up. She paused near the racing track, now marked, with proper lines and safety barriers, all community additions. Maybe, he thought, there was a way to build something new without losing what made it special in the first place. The shop's lease renewal notice sat unopened on Mike's desk, its official letterhead visible through the thin envelope. Next to it lay Sarah's proposal, dog-eared now from countless readings. The contrast between them represented everything he'd been wrestling with for the past week. His landlord had stopped by earlier, speaking carefully about rising property values and development opportunities. The unspoken message was clear. The rent would be going up significantly. Mike's mental calculations told him what he already knew. The shop's current income couldn't sustain it. The bell above the door chimed, and Tommy Chen entered carrying his laptop. "Got something you should see," he said, pulling up a spreadsheet he'd created. "I've been tracking the maintenance costs for all the racing cars, not just the twins. We're spending more each month as more kids join in." Mike nodded, having noticed the same trend. What had started as a project for two had grown into something bigger. Danny Thompson's younger brother now needed adaptive controls for his leg brace. Lisa Rodriguez's cousin, visiting from Chicago, had asked about building a similar program in her neighborhood. "There's more," Tommy continued, switching to a browser window. "Remember those videos I posted? They're getting attention, support. Groups, pediatric rehabilitation centers, they're all asking how we did it, how we made it work." The weight of those questions settled on Mike's shoulders. They'd made it work through late nights, community donations, and sheer determination. But determination alone couldn't pay rising rent or fund expansion. Sarah's proposal offered solutions to all these problems, with resources that could help not just their community, but others like it. Yet Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something precious might be lost in the process. The twins arrived for their afternoon practice, their grandmother following with a concerned expression. "The school called today," Martha said quietly while the girls got ready. "They want Jamie and Jesse to demonstrate their racing cars at the state STEM fair, but we'd need better safety certification," Mike finished. It was becoming a familiar roadblock. Their homegrown solutions, while carefully engineered, didn't meet official standards for public demonstration. Jamie and Jesse were already discussing the STEM fair as they prepared their cars. "We could show other kids how the controls work," Jamie said excitedly. "Maybe help design new ones for different needs." "And I could explain the physics," Jesse added. "The calculations for different track conditions, the effect of weight distribution on turning radius." Their enthusiasm made the choice both easier and harder. Mike watched them run through their pre-race checks, a procedure they'd helped develop. These weren't just kids using adaptive equipment anymore. They were young engineers in the making. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with her usual timing and intuition, carrying fresh coffee and pastries. "I heard about the lease," she said, having her own experience with rising rents, "and about Phoenix Motors' offer." Mike accepted the coffee gratefully. "I keep thinking about what we might lose. The Saturday morning repairs where everyone chips, in the way the kids modify their cars together, sharing ideas, the community we've built. Or what we might gain," Mrs. Rodriguez suggested gently. "The chance to help more families, to show other communities what's possible." Outside, the twins were walking Tommy through an idea they had for improving their control interfaces. Their confidence had grown so much that sometimes Mike forgot how things used to be before the racing program began. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Board meeting tomorrow. They need an answer." The lease notice seemed to stare at him from his desk. The choice wasn't just about business anymore. It was about the future of something larger than himself, larger even than Maple Grove. Martha touched his arm, her voice soft but certain. "You know, when Sarah left, I thought I had to choose between holding on to the past and accepting the future. Took me years to realize sometimes the best path forward is the one where you don't have to choose, where you find a way to keep what matters while building something new." Mike looked out at the twins, now demonstrating their racing techniques to a small group of neighborhood kids. They'd created something magical here in Maple Grove, something that had changed lives. Maybe the real choice wasn't between preserving it or expanding it. Maybe, like the twins had shown them all, it was about finding a new way forward that nobody had imagined before. Nobody saw exactly when it happened. One moment Jessie was leading the pack through the final turn of the qualifying heat, her candy apple red racer taking the precise line she'd calculated countless times before. The next moment, the steering mechanism failed, sending her car straight instead of following the curve. Mike's heart stopped as the car headed toward the crowd. His hand slammed the emergency shutoff, but the failed mechanism had damaged the override circuit. For 2 horrifying seconds, the car was under no one's control. It missed the spectators by inches, finally crashing into the hay bales they used as barriers. The sound of impact seemed to echo through the suddenly silent street. "Jessie!" Jamie's cry cut through the stillness as Martha quickly wheeled both girls toward the crash site. Mike was already there, dropping to his knees beside the wreckage, his experienced hands assessing the damage with trembling fingers. The steering assembly had sheared clean through. Metal fatigue, he realized with a sick feeling. He should have seen it coming, should have replaced the components more regularly, should have... "Is everyone okay?" Sarah's voice carried across the crowd as she pushed through, her face pale. She'd been watching the races more frequently lately, trying to understand her daughter's world. Now that world had nearly collapsed in front of her. "I'm fine, Mum," Jessie said quietly, but her hands were shaking on her wheelchair's controls. Just a crash." But it wasn't just a crash. Mike could see it in the faces of the parents drawing their children back, in Tommy Chen's worried frown as he reviewed the footage on his phone, in Martha's tight grip on the twins' wheelchair. Handles, Sarah knelt beside Mike, her designer slacks getting stained by oil and dirt. Her eyes weren't on the crashed car, but on the exposed steering mechanism. "The metal's stressed beyond tolerance," she said, her engineering background evident in her quick assessment. "The repeated load from high-speed turns—" "I know," Mike cut her off, harsher than he meant to. "I know what happened." He picked up the broken piece, the metal still warm from friction. This was his failure. Not just mechanical, but moral. He'd pushed homemade solutions too far, too fast. The crowd began to disperse, parents murmuring about safety concerns and liability issues. Danny Thompson's father was already pulling his son's car from the lineup, shaking his head apologetically. "At Mike, we need to suspend the races," Tommy said softly, showing Mike the footage. "At least until we can check all the cars, upgrade the safety systems." Jamie wheeled forward, her blue hair clip catching the sun. "But the state STEM fair is next week. We've been practicing our demonstration." "No," the word came simultaneously. From Mike, Sarah and Martha. The twins' faces fell, understanding the adult unity for what it was. The end of something precious. Sarah stepped forward, her business persona settling over her like armor. "I can have a Phoenix Motors engineering team here tomorrow. We'll do a complete safety analysis, implement proper testing protocols." "This isn't a corporate problem to solve," Mike interrupted, frustration breaking through his usual calm. "These kids don't need more technology thrown at them. They need—" He trailed off, looking at the broken steering mechanism in his hands. "They need both," Martha said firmly, surprising everyone. "They need your heart, Mike, and Sarah's resources. Stop fighting over who knows best and start working together before someone really gets hurt." The twins sat in stunned silence, their matching hair clips the only bright spots in the gloomy atmosphere. Jessie's calculations and Jamie's designs lay forgotten in their laps, dreams temporarily grounded by reality. Mike stood slowly, decades of mechanical experience weighing heavy on his shoulders. Every repair he'd ever made had taught him the same lesson. Sometimes things had to break before you could fix them properly. "Your mother's right," he said to the twins, but his eyes were on Sarah. "We've taken this as far as we can on our own. These kids deserve better than what we can cobble together in my shop." Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'll cancel tomorrow's board meeting. This is more important. We need to get this right, not for Phoenix Motors, but for them." She gestured to the group of kids still hovering uncertainly at the edge of the track. As they began picking up the pieces of Jessie's car, Mike noticed something that gave him pause. The twins weren't crying or complaining. Instead, they had their heads together, Jamie already sketching a modified steering design while Jessie calculated stress tolerances on her notebook. They hadn't given up. They were adapting, just as they'd always done. Maybe it was time for the adults in their lives to do the same. Mike's workbench had never been so crowded. Sarah's laptop displayed complex 3D models next to his hand-drawn sketches. Phoenix Motors' stress analysis reports lay beside Jamie's artistic designs and Jessie's mathematical calculations. Two worlds, colliding or perhaps finally finding their fit. "See here?" Mike pointed to a wear pattern on the failed steering component. "The kids naturally pull harder on right turns. We need to account for that asymmetrical stress." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We can reinforce this section with a carbon fiber composite. Lighter than steel, but 5 times the tensile strength." She paused, glancing at Mike. "Though we might want to keep the outer casing aluminum. For the sound." Mike looked up, surprised. "You noticed that? The way the twins listen to their cars?" "Yes. Sometimes the most important feedback isn't digital." She smiled slightly. Some lessons take 12 years to learn. They'd been working like this for 3 days, ever since the accident. The twins had become regular fixtures in the shop. After school, their homework spread across an old card table as they contributed their own expertise to the redesign. "What if," Jamie suggested, holding up a new sketch, "we made the control interface adjustable? Different kids need different things." Jessie was already running numbers on her calculator. "We could create a calibration sequence, let each driver customize their sensitivity settings." Mike and Sarah shared a look. The twins weren't just testing the cars anymore. They were helping design the future of adaptive racing. Tommy Chen arrived with dinner from Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery, his laptop tucked under his arm. "Got those slow-motion videos you wanted?" he said, pulling up frame-by-frame footage of different drivers' techniques. "And something else you should see." He opened his email, showing them messages from across the country. Support groups, therapy centers, parents of disabled children, all reaching out after seeing his videos of the Maple Grove races. All asking the same question: how can we do this for our kids? "It's not just about fixing the steering," Sarah said quietly. "It's about building something that can grow." She turned to Mike. "Something that combines your hands-on experience with Phoenix's resources." Mike picked up one of the twins' old control units, his fingers tracing the worn edges where determination had met design. "These kids don't need a product," he said. "They need a partnership." "Then let's give them both," Sarah replied. She opened a new document on her laptop and typed, "Community Racing Initiative, a joint project of Anderson Custom Mechanics and Phoenix Motors." The twins wheeled closer, attracted by the change in their mother's voice. "Does this mean we can race again?" Jamie asked. "Soon," Mike promised, "but this time we're going to do it right. Your mother's engineers are helping me design new safety systems, and we need you two to test them." "Not just test them," Sarah added. "Help design them. You understand what other kids like you need better than anyone." Jessie's eyes lit up. "Can we show the new designs at the STEM fair, not to race, but to demonstrate the engineering principles?" "And the community aspects," Jamie chimed in. "How everyone works together to make it happen." Mike and Sarah exchanged another look, this one lasting longer. Something was shifting in the air of the old shop, like the moment when a troubled engine finally finds its rhythm. "First," Mike said, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper, "we need to establish some proper testing protocols. Safety has to come first." Sarah was already typing. "I can have our certification team here by Friday, but," she added, seeing Mike's expression, "we'll do the initial testing here, in the shop, where it all started." The twins settled into their familiar spots. Notebooks ready. Tommy set up his camera to document the process. Even Martha stopped by, bringing fresh coffee and her quiet wisdom. As the evening wore on, the shop filled with the sounds of collaboration, pencils scratching, keyboards clicking, eager voices suggesting improvements. On the workbench, old and new components lay side by side, much like the people working on them. Different approaches, finding common ground in a shared purpose. "You know what this means?" Jessie said suddenly, looking up from her calculations. "Every kid like us, everywhere, might get a chance to race." Jamie smiled at her sister. "And they'll know it started here in Maple Grove, because a mechanic decided to build something special." Mike and Sarah watched their daughters work, both recognizing that sometimes the best way to rebuild trust was to build something new together. The blueprints for the new workshop covered an entire wall of Mike's office, their blue lines promising something bigger than anyone had initially imagined. What had started as a simple expansion of his shop had evolved into plans for the country's first adaptive racing development center. "The testing track loops around here," Sarah explained to the community council, her finger tracing the outdoor circuit, "with adjustable difficulty sections that can be modified for different skill levels. The safety barriers are state-of-the-art, but we've designed them to look like the hay bales we've always used. Some traditions are worth keeping." Mike stood, Beside her, still wearing his work shirt despite the formal nature of the meeting, the main workshop will be fully accessible, with adjustable height workbenches and tool stations. We want the kids involved in every aspect, from design to maintenance. The twins sat in the front row, their notebooks open to pages filled with suggestions they'd gathered from other young racers. Their mother had insisted their input be taken seriously, and the architects had incorporated many of their ideas into the final design. But what about the regular auto repair business? Mr. Peterson asked, voicing the practical concerns of the neighborhood. Some of us have been bringing our cars to Mike for years. The repair shop stays, Mike assured him. In fact, it's expanding. We'll have a training program for young mechanics, with special focus on adaptive vehicle modification. Some of these kids might want to work on full-size cars someday. Sarah pulled up the next slide on her presentation. Phoenix Motors is establishing a foundation to cover operational costs and ensure the program remains accessible to everyone. But day-to-day operations will stay in local hands. This isn't a corporate takeover, it's a community partnership. The plans showed how the new facility would blend into the neighborhood. Brick facade, matching the local style, green spaces for families to gather, even a small cafe that Mrs. Rodriguez would manage. Everything designed to feel like a natural evolution of what had grown organically in Maple Grove. We've already had inquiries from 3 other cities, Tommy Chen added, now officially the program's media coordinator. They want to know how they can start similar programs. We'll be able to train their instructors here, help them establish their own communities. Jamie raised her hand, her blue hair clip catching the fluorescent light. Can we show them our new design for the beginner cars? The ones with the progressive control system? Jessie joined in, red clip bobbing as she nodded eagerly. We've calculated how to adjust the responsiveness based on each driver's ability level. It grows with them as they improve. Mike couldn't help smiling. The twins had become more than just racers. They were innovators. Their latest design incorporated features that neither he nor Sarah's engineers had considered, born from their unique perspective as users. Martha watched from her seat, her eyes glistening slightly. The grandmother, who had raised 2 disabled girls alone, was seeing them become leaders in their community, helping shape a future they once could only watch from the sidelines. After the presentation, as the council members studied the plans and discussed details, Mike found Sarah standing by the window. She was watching the twins demonstrate their latest control modification to a group of interested parents and children. "You know," she said softly, "I left because I thought I needed to build something big to help them. Turns out they just needed someone to build something real." Mike nodded, understanding. Sometimes the biggest changes start small. One car, one race, one community at a time. The construction would begin next month. Mike's old shop would be incorporated into the new building, preserved like the heart of something growing. The lease renewal notice that had once seemed so threatening was now framed on his wall, the last one he'd ever need to worry about. Outside, the evening races were starting up again, now with improved safety systems and professional oversight. But the spirit remained the same. Kids helping kids, parents sharing advice, a community making sure everyone got their chance to compete. Jamie and Jessie led the first heat, their candy apple red racers sporting prototype versions of their new control system. As they navigated the track with skilled precision, Sarah stepped closer to Mike. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me what they really needed, what I needed to see." Mike watched the twins cross the finish line together, their synchronized driving a testament to years of practice and determination. "They showed us both," he replied. "We just had to be ready to learn." The plans on the wall caught the setting sun, casting long shadows across the floor. But unlike the shadows of the past, these pointed toward a future bright with possibility. Future built not by one person's vision, but by a community's shared dream of making space for everyone in the race. The first prototype rolled out of the production bay, gleaming with possibility. It looked deceptively similar to the twins' original races, the same candy apple red paint that had become something of a trademark. But beneath the familiar exterior lay months of engineering collaboration between Phoenix Motors' tech team and Mike's practical experience. "Ready for the first test run?" Mike asked, running through his safety checklist one more time. The new track stretched before them, its surface pristine, safety barriers in place, and sensors active at every turn. Jessie adjusted her red hair clip and studied the telemetry display they'd integrated into her control panel. The response curve. "Looks good," she said, sounding more like an engineer than a 12-year-old. "But we should test it at different sensitivity levels." Jamie nodded, her blue clip catching the morning light. "Some kids might need a gentler learning curve than we did." She held up her notebook, showing the progression of control settings she'd mapped out for different skill levels. Sarah stood back, watching her daughters work with barely concealed pride. They'd grown so much in the past months, not just as racers, but as innovators. The Phoenix Motors engineering team had learned to take their suggestions seriously, especially after the twins' insight about progressive control resistance had solved a persistent calibration issue. "Testing protocols in place," Tommy Chen announced from his new media command center, where multiple cameras would capture every aspect of the trial runs. "Recording beginning now." The first test focused on basic safety features. Jamie took the lead, deliberately triggering the new emergency shutdown system at various points around the track. Each time, the car responded perfectly, coming to a controlled stop while maintaining stability. "Much better than hay bales," Mike noted, remembering the crash that had sparked all these changes. He and Sarah had spent weeks perfecting the new barrier system, combining Phoenix's impact absorption technology with his practical understanding of real-world racing conditions. Jessie's turn involved testing the adaptive control interface. Her calculations had helped design a system that could adjust its sensitivity based on the user's strength and coordination levels. "Try setting 3, she called to Danny Thompson, who was helping with the trials. "It should feel more responsive than your old controller." Danny, his leg brace now sporting a custom Phoenix Motors logo, manipulated the controls with growing confidence. "It's like it knows what I'm trying to do," he said, executing a perfect turn that would have been challenging on the old system. Sarah made notes on her tablet, already thinking about applications beyond racing. The adaptive interface could revolutionize various forms of mobility assistance, and it had started with 2 girls who just wanted to join their friends on the track. The afternoon brought visitors, representatives from 3 different cities, parks and recreation departments interested in establishing their own adaptive racing programs. The twins switched effortlessly into their new role as program ambassadors. "The key is making everyone feel like they're really racing, not just participating," Jamie explained, demonstrating how the control systems could be customized. "No special treatment, just different ways of achieving the same goal." Jessie added, "And the maintenance program is crucial. We teach basic repairs and adjustments because it's not just about driving, it's about understanding your vehicle." Mike watched them with a mixture of pride and amazement. The girls who had once watched races from the sidelines were now teaching others how to build an inclusive racing community. They spoke with the authority of experience, tempering technical knowledge with personal understanding. "We'd like to start with 5 units. One of the visitors said, reviewing the prototype specifications. "How soon can you begin production?" Sarah stepped forward, but gestured for the twins to answer. They'd earned that right. "Production isn't the hard part," Jamie said, sharing a knowing look with her sister. "It's building the community around them. You need the right people, the right support system." "We can help with that too," Jessie added. "We're developing a training program for instructors, based on what we learned here in Maple Grove." The visitors looked impressed, if slightly surprised to be getting such professional consultation from 2 12-year-olds. But Sarah and Mike knew better. The twins had lived this experience from every angle, as spectators as racers, as engineers, and now as teachers. As the day's testing wrapped up, Mike made one final inspection of the prototype. The vehicle represented everything they'd worked toward. The perfect blend of high-tech innovation and hands-on practicality, wrapped in a package that looked like it belonged on any racing track. "Ready for full production?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. Mike smiled, watching the twins demonstrate a particularly tricky maneuver to their visitors. "Almost. Just a few more refinements. We want to get this exactly right." "We already have," Sarah replied softly. "Look at them. They're not just racing anymore, they're leading." The prototype sat ready for its next test run, its candy apple red finish glowing in the late afternoon sun. But the real prototype, the one that mattered most, was the community they'd built around it, where everyone got a chance not just to participate, but to excel. The morning of the grand opening, Mike stood in the doorway of the new workshop, breathing in the mixture of fresh paint and motor oil. The familiar scents grounded him as he watched the community gather for what the local paper was calling a new chapter in adaptive sports history. The parking lot had been transformed into a festival space, with Mrs. Rodriguez's cafe providing refreshments from its permanent new location. Tommy Chen directed his volunteer media team, their cameras ready to stream the event to interested communities across the country. The race course gleamed with its professional-grade surface and safety systems, though Mike had insisted on keeping one stack of hay bales near the finish line, a reminder of where they'd started. "Nervous?" Sarah asked, appearing beside him. She'd skipped her usual corporate attire in favor of a Phoenix Motors racing team jacket that matched the ones the twins wore. "Not about the race," Mike replied. "They're more than ready." His eyes drifted to the growing crowd. Racing teams had come from 3 different states, each with their own adaptive needs, each about to experience what the Parker twins had helped pioneer. The twins were in their element, conducting last-minute checks on their races while answering questions from new drivers and their families. Their custom racing jackets bore patches reading "Development Team Lead," titles they'd more than earned during the testing phase. Remember, Jamie was telling a young girl with cerebral palsy similar to their own, "The controls adapt to you. You're not adapting to them." She demonstrated the calibration sequence they'd designed, showing how the system learned each driver's unique movement patterns. Jesse added, "And don't worry about being perfect. Our first races weren't about winning, they were about belonging." She caught Mike's eye across the lot and smiled, remembering those early days of practice in front of his shop. Martha arrived with an album tucked under her arm. Not the old family photos this time, but a new collection chronicling the journey from those first custom races to today's grand opening. She'd become the program's unofficial historian, understanding that this story needed to be preserved. At precisely noon, Sarah stepped up to the microphone. The crowd fell silent, camera lights blinking. "A year ago," she began, "I came back to Maple Grove thinking I had solutions. What I found instead was a community that had already solved something more important than any technical challenge. They'd solved the problem of inclusion, not with corporate resources or advanced technology, but with heart, determination, and a mechanic who refused to accept limitations." She gestured to Mike, who reluctantly joined her at the podium. "The Anderson Phoenix Adaptive Racing Program isn't about replacing human ingenuity with automation. It's about combining the best of both worlds to create opportunities. Today, we're not just opening a facility, we're opening doors." The twins led the first heat, naturally. They'd insisted that their original candy apple red racers, now upgraded, with the latest safety features, but still bearing the scrapes and scars of their learning journey, should lead the inaugural run. 6 other racers joined them at the starting line, each vehicle customized to its driver's needs, each representing a different story of determination. Tommy's voice rang out over the PA system, "Racers ready!" Mike held his breath, seeing not just the polished track and professional setup, but echoes of those first practice runs in his driveway. Beside him, Sarah gripped his arm, her CEO confidence momentarily replaced by simple maternal anxiety. 3, 2, 1, go! The race was everything they'd hoped for. Not just a demonstration of technology or skill, but a celebration of possibility. The twins didn't win. That honor went to a boy from Ohio, using a breath-controlled system they'd helped design, but their grins as they crossed the finish line were brighter than any victory trophy. The real triumph came afterward, as families gathered around the new workshop. Parents who had driven hundreds of miles found themselves sharing stories and advice, just as Maple Grove's residents had done during those early Saturday races. Children who had never imagined competing in any sport were already signing up for the next race day. "This is really happening," Martha said softly, adding photos of the day to her album. "They're really changing the world." Mike watched as the twins demonstrated maintenance procedures to a group of enthusiastic new racers, their confidence and expertise shining through. Sarah stood nearby, talking with parents about expanding the program to their communities. Her corporate experience now tempered by genuine understanding. "No," he replied to Martha, thinking of all the pieces that had come together to make this possible. "We all are." The sun began to set on Maple Grove's biggest day, painting the sky in shades of promise. The first official race day was ending, but something much bigger was just beginning. In garages and workshops across the country, other communities would soon start their own journeys, guided by the lessons learned in a small neighborhood where a mechanic once looked at two girls watching from the sidelines and decided to change the rules of the race. 1 year after the grand opening, Mike stood in his expanded workshop, holding the keys to the newest addition, a research and development lab specifically for young innovators. Through the window, he could see the Parker twins leading a design session with kids from across the country, their matching hair clips bright against the technical diagrams spread across the table. The program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 5 other cities had launched their own chapters, each adapting the Maple Grove model to their community's needs. But more importantly, the original spirit remained intact. Every Saturday, local kids still gathered to race, learn, and belong. "Remember, when they used to just watch from the driveway?" Martha asked, joining him at the window. She'd become the program's heart, offering grandmother-style wisdom to nervous parents just starting their journey. The photo album under her arm had grown into 3 volumes, documenting not just history, but hope. "Hard to believe they're teaching at MIT's summer engineering program next month," Sarah added, arriving with coffee from Mrs. Rodriguez's cafe, which had become the unofficial meeting spot for visiting families. The past year had changed her too. She split her time between Phoenix Motor's main office and Maple Grove, understanding now that true innovation happened at ground level. Through the glass, they watched Jesse explain gear ratios to a young boy with muscular dystrophy, while Jamie demonstrated how to adjust control sensitivity for different mobility levels. At 13, the twins had already been featured in engineering journals and invited to speak at accessibility conferences. But they remained grounded, never forgetting what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. "Mr. Anderson," Danny Thompson called out, wheeling in a new prototype he'd been working on. His leg brace was now a badge of pride, customized with racing stripes. "Can you check the alignment on this? I think I've figured out a way to make the controls even more responsive." Mike smiled, remembering the boy who'd once asked to make his car as smooth as the twins. Now Danny was developing his own innovations, proving that disability could be a source of insight rather than limitation. The workshop had become more than a repair shop or even a racing center. It was an incubator for dreams, where every challenge was seen as an opportunity for innovation. Sarah's corporate experience and Mike's practical knowledge had created something neither could have achieved alone. Tommy Chen, now heading the program's expanding media presence burst in with excitement. "You've got to see this." He pulled up a video on his tablet showing kids racing adaptive vehicles in communities across the country. It's happening everywhere. Different designs, different needs, but the same spirit. "And to think," Martha said softly, "it all started because a mechanic noticed two little girls watching from their driveway." Sarah touched her mother's arm, years of absence and redemption in the gesture. "No, it started because this whole community decided those girls deserved a chance to race. I just wish I'd understood that sooner." The afternoon brought a surprise visitor, the boy from Ohio who'd won that first official race. He'd come to donate his trophy to the workshop's growing collection. "Put it where other kids can see it," he insisted, "so they know anything's possible." Mike found the perfect spot, right next to Jamie's first winner's ribbon from those early neighborhood races. The display case told their story, from humble beginnings to national impact, but always centered on the simple joy of inclusion. Later, as the day wound down, Mike watched the twins pack up their teaching materials. They still raced their original candy apple red cars every Saturday, the scarred but beloved vehicles now serving as reminders that perfection wasn't the goal, participation was. "Do you ever miss the old days?" he asked them. "When it was just us testing things in the shop?" Jamie adjusted her blue hair clip thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But then I see some kids' face light up when they realize they can really race, really compete, really belong," Jessie finished, her red clip catching the evening light. "Besides, we're still testing things in the shop. We're just helping other people test their ideas, too." Sarah and Martha joined them, carrying boxes of new parts for tomorrow's workshop. The four of them, mother, grandmother, and twins, moved. Together with the comfort of a family that had found its rhythm. "Phoenix Motors Board wants to expand the program internationally," Sarah mentioned. "But I told them we need to do it the Maple Grove way. Community by community, person by person." Mike nodded, understanding. They'd created something that couldn't be mass-produced or corporate packaged. It had to grow organically, built on relationships and real needs. As they locked up for the night, Mike paused to look at the workshop sign, Anderson Phoenix Adaptive Racing Center, with the subtitle, "Where Everyone Races." Below it, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a small plaque. "Started with two girls who wanted to join in and a community that made it happen." The twins' laughter echoed across the parking lot as they headed home, their wheelchairs moving in perfect synchronization. Sarah and Martha followed, 3 generations finally moving forward together. And Mike, watching them go, realized that some repairs fixed more than just machines. They fixed the broken places in people's lives, in communities, in the world itself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new races, new dreams to engineer. But that was fine. After all, every great race was just the beginning of the next one.